In an about turn this afternoon, the ANC NEC adjourned its meeting that was scheduled to take place.
And the party says the report would first be submitted to the ANC's National Working Committee, and then the NEC would reconvene on Sunday. And the party's acting Secretary General, Paul Mashatile, telling journalists that the meeting will have to take place. It's important that it takes place before the Parliament process on Tuesday.
We brought in our international affairs editor, Sophie Mokoena, to join us to have a discussion about this. And it's for a number of different reasons, Sophie, that we're gathering tonight. First, it's to tap into that institutional memory. You have worked almost 3 decades on politics in South Africa. You know how the ANC works. You're often privy to things that a lot of journalists might not be. And I think the most important place to start is just the context of where this all sits in terms of the ANC's own internal history and the fact that they cannot hold on to a president, with the exception of Madiba, who only served a term.
Well, I think the Minister of Finance, Godongwane, summed it very well, that they fired their presidents for a number of years. Only Madiba finished, even though it was 1 term, 5 years. And then Begi came in, and towards the end of his 2nd tenure, left with 6 months, if my memory serves me well, he was recalled. And then many people and some journalists and some of us predicted that this is going to be a trend, not only in terms of national government, provincial, even local government, the recall. And it's happening. It happened with former President Jacob Zuma. He was left with almost a year. And now President Cyril Ramaphosa, the questions around his future, first term. And therefore, it has been that kind of movement within the ANC where they always have a problem to either manage transition or the personal interest of individuals within the party take precedence in terms of what needs to happen in the country and in the organization.
And when we, look at what happened this afternoon in the context of what happened before, a whole mix-up of processes. But in the past, we've seen, although things were tense, although, people were trying behind the scenes to move things around at the last minute. But right now, it looks like confusion reigns.
It was kind of, I don't know how to describe my analysis and my feeling at that moment when I saw what was happening at the NEC. The danger with this is that the whole country is watching. I'm sure people were glued on their TV because they knew that around 2, this was going to happen in terms of seeing them coming in and, of course, wait to hear the outcome. The whole continent is watching. This is the oldest liberation organization in Africa. This is not an opposition, it is a governing party. This is a very strategic country for international community, a gateway to Africa. So almost the whole world is watching. International investors are watching. And therefore, when you saw what happened, it was disturbing for many, I am sure, because one, I don't understand how they fail to follow processes that you don't have the top 5 or top 4 because you don't have 2 people who are supposed to be there, the passing on of Jesse Duarte and the suspension of the Secretary General. Why the officials didn't discuss this matter to say we're taking this agenda to the National Working Committee. The National Working Committee will make input. It's not final. You take it to the NEC, which is the highest decision-making body, and only there, whatever was presented by the National Working Committee can either be approved or amended or completely thrown out, so that you can give your deployees in Parliament, in the caucus, a direction, so that they can have enough time to digest this thing. Now, latest Monday, they must call a caucus to brief the caucus. On Tuesday, the matter is before Parliament. So it was clearly showing that there's a challenge in terms of processes. And I can go as far as saying perhaps leadership or people who were advising the leadership in terms of how to process this issue. The second issue for me, what was glaring, is when the president of the ANC was not there, because with Mbeki, he was not the president of the party at that time. The NEC, the president must set a tone for the party. Yes, he's affected, but it's better to go there and say, comrades, this is a special NEC convened by officials and the NWC, because the matter affects me. This is my proposal. And then let the NEC say, okay, recuse yourself, let's discuss this. Or perhaps to say, let's talk about this while you are here, and we'll ask you to leave us and we can entertain this issue. So how do you have an NEC when the leader of the NEC, the president of the ANC, nobody knew until that moment that he was not going to attend? So I think those kind of mistakes, little mistakes, does send some confusion to those who are watching. And I think it's something that they will have to correct.
You touched on the impact from a continental perspective, and I know that we're going to go to what this means for the international community. But what you're sharing with us, Sophie, is a really important understanding of the inner workings of the ANC in terms of process and protocol. As you say, oldest liberation movement on the planet. They've got this figured out. They know what is supposed to happen. Why do you think they got it so spectacularly wrong in putting the cart before the horse, as they evidently did? And in sharing that, just shed some light, on our viewers who don't understand, what is this NWC and NEC? It all sounds so confusing.
The top six, clearly, it's your officials. The president of the ANC, the leader of the party, the deputy president, the national chairperson, the treasurer, the secretary general, and the deputy secretary general. You don't have the secretary general and the deputy secretary general. The NWC, it's a committee within the NEC, the National Executive Committee, that processes agendas and deal with some of the issues, but present those recommendations or papers or resolutions to the NEC to be ratified by the NEC, which is the highest decision-making body between conferences. And therefore, you have to follow that kind of a process when you deal with a matter like this. And therefore, I think, and what's surprising, they have institutional memory. They have the former presidents too. They have the former deputy president who was the secretary general running the organization. The president himself of the ANC is the former secretary general. Therefore, they do have institutional memory.
Yeah, I mean, and they've had practices, at this Bongi, where we've got the pictures of, obviously, the former presidents of the country, at various points. Just walk us back to what this means against the lens of history and what happened when it came to Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma.
With Jacob Zuma, we know the fallout was in 2005 after that judgment by Squire. That was interpreted the way it was interpreted. And the then president of the ANC and the president of the country, Thabo Mbeki, decided to release Jacob Zuma from his duties as the deputy president of the country. Then his argument, when we spoke to the people who were very close to him, because some of us did predict. I remember speaking to Smarts Ngonyama and Janku Kumbi saying, but this is going to cause chaos. Little did I know it will. Janku said to me, the problem here, Sophie, you are dealing with a state, and you are dealing with the constitution. You are dealing with the office of the president. That was the answer. And that was his argument, protect the office. And then with President Zuma, it was another problem of Nkandla, how it was handled. But at the end of the day, what becomes a problem is the division that plays itself within the ANC, where sometimes they would take decisions that will haunt them later, like the recall. Now it's a trend. It's very difficult to arrest it. You can't say you are an exception today because it was done to Mbeki, to Zuma, to so and so, to so and so.
And interestingly, that recall is even finding its way into the provinces, even right now. And also, I'm going to ask us just to pause for a second and listen to the many voices that were coming out earlier on with Samgele Masego, and one of those being the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana.
We've chased every president other than Mandela, so it's not going to be something new. And the stability has never been impacted. So it's only you who are impacting a sense of instability.
But the rand was affected.
It was, because you guys are creating an impression that there's instability. When I asked the Bloomberg people, when I explained these matters, the rand moved from 760 to 735. I'm not saying there's no leadership instability. All I'm saying, the leadership instability is not new in the ANC. From 2005, we've been having a crisis of this nature, and it has never impacted on the macroeconomic variables and the stability of the economy.
Well, I think diplomacy tends to be rather more careful about, interfering or intervening when countries are going through various difficult times or processes. So while one or two colleagues have asked, I've indicated to them that we have a constitution in South Africa and we have the rule of law. And one of the things we are learning still as a new democracy is to allow processes to take their course and to respect that the rule of law must also take its course. Otherwise, you return to the injustice that was part of our history. So it's important that a process has been initiated. Let us allow it to take its course and not jump to conclusions or be too quick in reading one paragraph to assume the entirety is a conclusion. So I think we should respect that the process must unfold as is required by the rules of the National Assembly, by our constitutional framework, and by natural rules of justice in South Africa.
And also, as we hear about processes, we hear about the ANC has found itself here before. It's you journalists who are, talking about this instability and creating panic. There's something that springs to mind. It would be the voice of the late Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte, who was very strong in the past conferences in the lead up to that with, quelling some of the tensions or even trying to get them to respect processes and try to speak in somewhat of a, one voice. Is her absence being felt right now?
Definitely. Her absence, is glaring in terms of trying to pull together these men, unfortunately, because the top six, it's male-dominated. And therefore, she was always there to pull them together and use that, as women, we are instinct leaders. You compromise because you want order. And therefore, yes, it is. And above all, you don't even have the Secretary General. So it's a free-for-all almost. I mean, I saw a message on social media by one of the Youth League members who is also in the list of the National Executive Committee saying, yo, everybody's talking. The communications department almost like is found wanting. So you are correct. There's that kind of, but there's no reason. They have institutional memory. And like Godongwana said, they've traveled this road before. Why don't you do it neatly like you've done during Begi, during Zuma, even though it nearly got ugly? This time around, it's I don't know. And you see that the technicality, fortunately, perhaps that time, the two leaders were not leaders of the party. This time around, the person who's affected is also a leader of the organization. But every NEC, he sets a tone for the NEC, whatever issue that's been discussed. So I think the best option for me, the advisors should have given to him was that come, open the meeting, tell them that you can't make it or you want to be recused. let them adopt, let it be in the minutes, and let them approve or let them give us direction.
Well, Sophie, thank you very much for sharing what I think is a really important context around the nuance of how these things work. I recall you and I having our shoes ruined. I bought new shoes for Polokwane in 2007 in the bog that was Limpopo University. Sophie and I both asking the first questions to Jacob Zuma, who was elected as the president of the ANC. These are important memories to recall, Sophie, because they have been part of writing the history of our country. International and also a former political editor here at the SABC, Sophie Mokoena, sharing some important insight on the developments we're seeing this weekend.